Hey, everybody, friends, some of you I know, and hello, welcome. If I don't know you, also welcome. Everybody is welcome to this one. I'm Emilia Cachaparo. I'm the Director of Artistic and International Programs at TCG, and I use she, her pronouns. I'm calling in from the land of the Lenape people, also known as Manhattan, and it looks like there's a lot of sunlight coming through my window into my screen. I am so thrilled to welcome you all to this webinar, and we hope that it's going to be useful for you. And this webinar is about accessing PPP for freelance theater makers. I'm going to share a visual description of myself. I'm a brown-skinned Filipino woman with short black hair, black glasses, silver earrings, and a black sweater. And behind me is a blue wall. In today's webinar, we actually had one last week, so this is our second one. We're focusing on how theater makers who are self-employed, who work freelance, who work as 1099 contractors can access federal relief from the Payroll Protection Program, really to help demystify the process. And this technical assistance session is being led by Andrea Nellis, who's TCG's interim CFO, and Lucy Mallett of Arts FMS. We're going to be recording this webinar, and we're going to share it with you along with all of the slide decks. So if there's something you feel you didn't quite catch, we'll be getting it to you. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to offer our respects to the many lands on which we gather and to honor the traditional stewards of these lands. If you have a land acknowledgement as part of your personal or organizational practice, please share them in the comments now in the chat. And while you do, I will read the land acknowledgement that we post in TCG's office on 528th Avenue here in Manhattan. Theater Communications Group's offices are located on the Lenape land of Manhattan in Lenapehoking, the Lenape homeland. We honor the generations of stewardship the Lenape peoples have given to the water, air, and land. As guests, we pay respect to the Lenape peoples, past, present, and future, here in their homeland and throughout the Lenape diaspora. Now, land acknowledgement is a very positive first step, and it's also important to go beyond that, perhaps by asking yourself, how are you using your privilege to support Indigenous people and communities? How are you giving back to the land? So maybe just food for thought. I also actually want to acknowledge this very unique moment that we're finding ourselves in. It's been just about a year since so many of our theaters shut down. And according to the NEA, during the quarter ending in September 2020, when the overall unemployment rate averaged 8.5%, 52% of actors, 55% of dancers, and 27% of musicians were out of work. And we know that a lot of you on this call are within those demographics. We know how hard theater makers have had it, all theater folks, and especially those working freelance. And again, especially theater makers who are Black, Indigenous, and people of color, BIPOC. With all of this in mind, TCG has been actively ensuring that freelance theater makers and other gig economy workers with mixed income sources receive full support from the Federal Relief Fund. It's also why we launched the Freelancers Relief Fund for theater designers with the front office, and that was at the end of last year. For decades, we've committed to supporting freelancers through grant making and professional development opportunities, because we know you can't have a just and thriving theater ecology unless freelance theater makers are also thriving. I also want to share the launch of our Rising Leaders of Color program, which is now accepting applications. And I believe Corinna is going to be putting that in the chat. So without further ado, it's my great pleasure to turn things over to Andrea and Lucy to lead us through this webinar and technical assistance session. There is going to be a good amount of time and space at the end for Q&A, and we are so lucky to have them with us today. So take it away, you all.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Andrea Nellis, she, her, hers. I'm going to share a visual description with you. I'm a 50-ish white woman with shoulder-length brown hair and glasses, wearing a red shirt with black spots, and this is my living room behind me. I want to acknowledge the lands that I'm sitting on, the land of Munsee Lenape and the Lekawe peoples. I will let my colleague Lucy Mallett introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Lucy Mallett of Arts FMS. I identify as a she, her, hers as my visual description. I'm in my mid-30s. I'm a white woman with red hair and glasses, and I'm wearing a blue shirt sitting in front of a gray wall. I'm calling in from Nashville, and I want to acknowledge the lands I'm sitting on, the lands of the Cherokee, Shawnee, and Yuchi peoples.
Great. Thank you all for joining us today. Lucy and I are going to give you an overview of PPP as a freelancer, when your main income is reported on a Schedule C, and hopefully answer all of your questions so you can feel comfortable applying for these relief funds. Lucy and I both work with many performing arts groups. Doing finances for performing arts groups is our vocation. And so we spent a lot of time in the last year applying for and learning about PPP funds. So please feel free to put any questions you might have in the chat box as we're going. Lucy will try and answer them or feed them to me. And then at the end, we'll have lots of time also for questions. We want to make sure that everybody has all of their questions answered before we leave here today, so you can go get your funds. Can you go back one slide? Sorry, just to go quickly through our agenda. We're going to talk a little bit about what the PPP is, how you calculate who qualifies, how you calculate revenue reduction for the qualification, how you can calculate your loan amount. Next slide. Forgiveness, unemployment, what if your business is operating at a loss, and how to apply. A couple of things to keep in mind. I don't know if people realize the PPP rules are still changing, and most recent changes came out last week. We are trying to capture all of the information in here. But make sure you sign up for TCG emails so you could get advocacy alerts as they come along. Next slide, or two slides actually. So what is the PPP? It's the Payroll Protection Program is a forgivable loan to help businesses keep their workforce employed during coronavirus. So what if you're self-employed and receive 1099 income? The SBA is defining you as a business, and they just think of you as a business with one employee, yourself. And so there are two different PPPs, the first draw and the second draw. And currently the application deadline for PPPs is March 31st, though there might be a world that is extended. Next slide. One more. So who qualifies? So the first draw PPP is easy to qualify for. Your business needed to be operational February 15th, 2020. And you need to still be open. You have to have no more than 500 employees. And the current economic uncertainty has made a PPP loan necessary to sustain your business. And no proof is needed for this. So the first draw is easy, no proof, everybody can qualify as long as you are operational. Next slide. The second draw, so if you've already received the first draw, then you would apply for the second draw. If you've applied for no PPPs, you would apply for the first draw right now with no income revenue threshold. So for the second one, you have to have used the first PPP loan, though you don't have to have applied for forgiveness yet. You need to be operational on February 15th. You need to still be open. You could have no more than 300 employees. And you need to show a 25% or greater reduction in gross revenue. Next slide. One more. So how do you show the 25% revenue reduction? You can do it two ways. If you've done your 2020, so this revenue reduction can be on the full year or on just one quarter of the year. So you could, if you have done your 2020 tax return, you can compare your annual gross receipts as reported on your tax return between 2020 and 2019. And this would be gross receipts is line 7 on the Schedule C. And the other way to do it is to compare your gross receipts in any one quarter of 2020 with the same quarter of 19. So, you know, a quarter is a 3-month period. January through March, April through June, July through September, and then October through December. And this is just any money you receive. But can you go to the next slide? So you don't need to have any like formal documents. You could actually prove your reduction in gross receipts by using your bank statements. So if you go through those bank statements and you circle all of what is revenue that is coming into your bank, total it for 2020 and compare it to 2019, you can show your 25% revenue reduction. So what did I say? But you should annotate your bank statement, and then you need to sign and certify that that's the case. Did I miss something in this one, Lucy?
I think there's one more slide
Okay.
about this revenue reduction if we go forward.
Got it.
And so, yeah, definitely you want to make sure if you're using your bank statements to sign and certify each page of the bank statements and put together a summary for the SBA, just showing your totals of income and the comparison between either the calendar years or the fiscal quarters.
And all right.
And then, and just to say, the SBA has said that you don't need to provide this backup if your loan's under 150,000, but we've found that several lenders are requiring it anyway. So it just depends on where you apply.
Right. I think there are rules that the SBA put out, but each bank is a little bit different. And the ones that I've applied for on these have required the backup. And any kind of backup that you touch, you should just, or even you should make sure you sign and date it, because we've gotten a lot of things kicked back out if it's not signed and dated, because that is you certifying that it's correct. Next slide. One more. So how do you calculate the loan amount? So the loan amount is, for everybody, is 2.5 times your average monthly payroll costs. And your average monthly payroll costs can be calculated using one of these 3 time periods. It could either be exactly 1 year from the time of this loan application, the 1 year back. It could be the calendar year 2020, or it could be the calendar year 2019. As a general rule, I bet a lot of people will find the calendar year 2019 will be a higher amount, but you should definitely look at it. Next slide. So how do you know what your average monthly payroll is? So this is where actually the rules changed last week on this, and it's a really great new rule for freelancers. So your monthly payroll amount is found by dividing your gross income as reported on line 7 of your Schedule C. Everything is on your Schedule C. So 7 is gross income, or you could use line 31, which is net income for either 2019 or 2020. And it's up to a cap of 100,000. So if your net income is 105 and your gross income is 205, there's no need to use your gross revenue, because it will only ever be up to the cap of 100,000. And there can be more scrutiny if your gross revenue that you use is over 150,000. So how would you do, I'm going to just use the calculation at the cap of $100,000, because nobody who's self-employed can get more than this. So it's 100, let's say your revenue is $100,000, you divide it by 12, you multiply it by 2.5, and you get to 20,833.
And so for almost everyone using line 7, your gross income is going to be significantly beneficial to you and getting a larger loan that would be forgivable. It's really that if your net income is 100,000, or if your gross income's over 150, that you might want to consider doing it based on net income.
Right. This newest guidance said that you might have additional SBA review if your gross is over 150. All right. So forgiveness. Next slide. So one of the issues I've heard from a lot of people is they don't want to do this because of forgiveness and that they were worried that they would end up with a loan. I have not seen anybody not have their loans fully forgiven. So the first draw loans to show, so as a self-employed, you just need to show that you've used the money on your payroll. And what is your payroll as a self-employed? It is just the money. You're getting it, you show it getting deposited into your bank. And we've been told that is all the proof you need, is showing the money being deposited in your bank, and that is your payroll. But the actual rules are you can get forgiven if your employee and compensation levels are maintained, if the loan is spent on payroll and other eligible expenses, and at least 60% is spent on payroll. Go to the next slide. And then for loans under $150,000, you need very little documentation. There's the link to the form, but all you're doing is certifying that you've spent the money. You have no proof and you just submit it. Most banks have their own version of this form, but this is the form, and it is a one-page simple form.
I think we have got in the chat that we skipped over a slide, and I think that was about round 2 forgiveness.
Yes, thank you. I thought that. Round 2, so for everybody that's self-employed and getting a loan under 150,000, I think forgiveness is going to be very much the same for first and second round. The difference is, right? There's no other difference, Lucy.
Right. So if you have not had to already provide your 25% reduction in revenue back up to the bank in applying for the loan, you would have to provide that for forgiveness. But otherwise, it's the same 8 to 24 week period. You received the money, so you maintained your employee levels. And if it's under 150, you just certify that you used it. The SBA says they can come back and ask additional questions, but that would be unlikely when it's the only thing you are claiming is paying yourself.
And I mean, if you guys were doing something a little more complicated, you could choose any period between 8 and 24 weeks. But with this in the intersection of unemployment, I would always choose, since you don't have to prove anything on your payroll, I would choose 8 weeks so that it is the shortest time period possible. Next slide. I think we went, this is, all right. Yeah, this is just back what we just talked about, that there's a super simplified form for loans under 150,000. Unemployment. So how does PPP intersect with unemployment? There's not actually official guidance on the relationship between PPP and unemployment, but PPP is supposed to be a replacement for unemployment. So I think if you're approved for PPP, you need to report it as income to the state unemployment office. And you tell them, it's for the time period. So if you choose the 8 weeks, it would be for the 8 weeks. And depending on the amount, if your PPP works out to be less than your unemployment, they would probably give you the difference. But I think it's really sort of up to them. You should just say that you got the PPP, say that it's for the 8 weeks, and also clarify that it's not for work, right? This is income outside of work. And but there is not really clear guidance other than this is supposed to be the replacement for unemployment. So for the most part, you shouldn't be receiving it at the same time.
And I have read that some states are handling it somewhat differently. So the best guidance we give is just be honest in answering your questions for unemployment and report it as income. And that hopefully your state unemployment office can give you more guidance. And question about if this is unemployment or the PUA. And so for both of these, you would need, if you're getting traditional unemployment or the pandemic unemployment assistance, the PPP would count as income.
All right, next slide. So we've gotten a lot of questions before about, what if your business operated at a loss? So it should not matter now that the PPP rules are changed, because it will be you could use line 7 of gross income. So it doesn't matter if you've operated at a loss, as long as you've had some income come in. All right, next slide. Application. One more slide. So a lot of people do it with their banks. But I've also heard of a lot of success on these online programs. So you could apply on Cabbage, which I had never heard of before this, but I've known several people have gotten their PPP. QuickBooks also has it. PayPal has it. This particular round seems to be much slower than the first round. And you could also apply with your bank. Sometimes with the big banks, it just goes into a queue and you don't hear of it. So it might be simpler to do these online ones, but if you have a smaller bank, you have a relationship with a banker, I would definitely go to them first. It's always nicest to have somebody you can talk to. But we've had more success with the community banks than we've had with the larger banks, or at least we can feel less frustrated with them. I think we've gotten all of our PPPs through eventually, though this particular round is super slow. So if you haven't applied for a PPP yet, you get a first round. If you've already applied, then you get a second round, as long as you have the revenue reduction.
And this really, so today or tomorrow is really the absolute best time that you could apply as an independent contractor, because tomorrow night, the priority period of companies under 20 employees ends, and they'll go back to reviewing applications for large businesses as well. And so, Friday they announced that you can use line 7, and the application came out this weekend, which is really useful and should, get larger loans for almost everyone. And then you have today and tomorrow that you'd still be in a priority period. And so you'd probably get it through much more quickly than if you wait.
Karina, could you post those 2 applications I sent earlier to you? There are 2 different versions of these simplified small Schedule C applications if you want to look at them from the SBA, one for first round, one for second round. The other thing I just wanted to point out that's in the works before we start taking questions, in the new relief bill, and I haven't seen this, I just seen it in the newspaper, EIDL, I don't know if anybody remembers that from the spring. In the spring, you could apply for an EIDL loan and you would get a forgivable advance right away up to $10,000. And then that stopped on the forgivable advance, and just you would have to be able to get the loan. But I saw in the paper that one of the things in this new bill that is hopefully will be enacted this week, that EIDL advance might come back. So you should keep your eyes open for that, because it could be between $1,000 and $10,000, and it's a free.
It's a grant.
It's a grant. You don't, because then they're going to offer you a loan, and you do not have to take the loan. You could just take the advance as a grant and leave it as that.
And that is not taxable income. The PPP is not taxable income on the federal level. On the state level, each state is handling it differently. New York State is considering PPP taxable income, but federally you will not get taxed.
Same thing, I think unemployment in this new bill on federally, unemployment is not taxed. Did you just say that?
Yeah, I didn't say that, but what's going through right now is that for 2020, the first, I think 10,200 or 10,000.
Yes, 10,200, I think.
Of the unemployment assistance you received will be not taxable to help with, any surprise tax bills for people who have gotten the enhanced unemployment. So we've got a question: if my business received an EIDL loan in 2020, can I apply again for 2021? I assume you're asking if you can apply for EIDL again in 2021. I think there's probably not that guidance out yet since it's just coming back as available, but my guess would be no. But Andrea, do you know?
I don't know, but my guess would be no also, but
At
certainly
least for
worth,
the advance.
yeah, it's
portion.
certainly worth.
Yeah, keeping your eyes open for that. But the idle advance is just coming out with the new legislation.
Is there a difference between these online lenders and conventional banks in terms of loan terms? No, it is exactly the same. In truth, these banks and online lenders are actually just a portal to the SBA. And so they aggregate all your information and then they send it to the SBA. The SBA reviews it, gives them, a loan number and the funding, and then sends it back to you. But it's really just different versions of a funnel to SBA.
It does a forgivable loan mean that it doesn't need to be paid back? Yes. So when you get it, it is a loan and you do have the responsibility of applying for forgiveness to get it forgiven. But as Andrea said, as long as you apply for forgiveness that you've paid yourself, you can certify that you used it. We've had no one get denied forgiveness at this point that we've worked with.
And I've talked to bankers who consider the self-employed PPPs as almost just a given that it's forgiven. It's you got the money, so that means you used it appropriately. And just the act of receiving it is all you need.
There's a question about if you never applied for EIDL. EIDL is open right now, but not the advanced portion, except for very specific communities. So EIDL, there's an advanced portion, $1,000 to $10,000 as a grant, and then there's a loan up to $150,000 that you can pay back over 30 years. As of right now, you could apply for a loan, but given the new legislation, it might be worth waiting to see if the advance comes back.
Right. And I think that the EIDL loan, you can get up to $25,000 without any lien on your assets. And then if you go over 25,000, you do use some of your assets as collateral.
Yeah,
but
and you'll need to provide some insurance backup showing that. So it's very little documentation for under 25,000.
What is the benefit of applying for a PPP versus receiving PUA unemployment? I actually think you almost just need to sit down and do the math. I don't know how much what's the PUA right now?
So it's an extra 300. So probably most people are getting about 400 a week. So it is doing the math. I mean, one thing is if you are working right now, you're getting some independent contractor income. With PPP, that's just on top of it. You're not certifying that you're not working. It's to help assist paying you during that time. So if you are reporting income, you should take that into account as well with PPP. But I think it's kind of, a calculation to do of what you think your max PPP is and what you think and what you're getting on unemployment.
So like if your unemployment is 400 a week over 8 weeks, that's 3,200. And as long as your PPP is over that, I would certainly apply for the PPP. And
so we've got a question about the PPP and EIDL based on 1099 versus W-2. So the PPP loan is completely based on your 1099 income, your Schedule C income, because really whoever's paying you via W-2 could apply for their own PPP. And so you getting those wages don't qualify towards your own loan. The EIDL actually does not have to do with income. You report, it's been a while since I've looked at the application, but there are, you report your business, how many employees you have, but there's not the same qualifications in terms of income streams for the EIDL.
I think that most self-employed seem to have gotten a $1,000 advance,
yeah,
right?
It's $1,000 per employee and they count you as one.
So the EIDL, it stands for Economic
Injury Disaster
Loan. So it is to just help people out, and the idea about the advance was just to get money in people's hands fast.
So it is, generally, so the advance was to get money people's hands fast. The loan itself was up to $150,000 for nonprofits. The interest rate's 2.75. For profits or individuals, it would be 3.75 percent over 30 years that you'd pay it back. And you don't need to start paying it back until I think 1 year after you received it.
And somebody asked about the 1,000, that they received 1,000 last year versus up to 10,000. My guess is that it's the same amount of money. You would qualify for the same amount. And I don't think you can apply a second time, but it's always worth looking into. I think the EIDL is a program that has existed outside of COVID, and I think it is used mostly for farmers and for weather disasters. But
so the easy way to do your calculation for PPP, I mean, you do need to pull out your tax returns and look at line 7 and divide by 12 times 2.5 up to that cap of 20,833, and look at that over the 8 to 24 week period to see the comparison. And yes, for unemployment, we're talking about the base plus the additional 300 that would be affected, because basically you are reporting some amount of income, your PPP loan over the covered period to unemployment. So it affects the base and the extra amount on top of it.
right, because you're going through one system for both of those.
There's a question about how you choose the number of weeks, whether you get to choose or the lender decides. It is 8 to 24 weeks that you can have the loan proceeds, and that's not something the lender decides. It's something.
And you don't fill it out. You don't fill it out till forgiveness. So
Yeah.
When you're doing forgiveness, and since you don't need to do anything, if you're doing it raw for your Schedule C with no other employees but yourself, there's no reason to choose anything but the 8. Just get it done with. Because who knows, there might be a third PPP. So the EIDL, that $1,000 grant from last year would be for EIDL and has nothing to do with the PPP. So if you got that, you could still get PPP. You could get them both. What else did I miss? Did you? So yeah, so it's not the second draw. So the PPP stands on its own. So you can get a first and a second draw PPP. So there, if you have never gotten a PPP, I would also suggest applying as quick as possible, because you never know how the deadline right now you could not apply for a first draw and then a second draw by the deadline, but you never know if the deadline will keep being pushed out. Are there other questions?
Yes,
Yes.
except I can't type fast.
Okay, you can talk. We can hear you.
Okay, great. What if you have not filed your 2019 taxes yet? Are you just out of luck then?
I would at least see if you could figure out your Schedule C to do your.
No, but I mean, if you need to apply today or tomorrow for this first
You
draw.
can still apply through the full month of March. It's just that right now it would probably go through more quickly. But I think you do need to have at least the Schedule C that you're going to submit filled out. It should be a match what you're sending to the IRS.
Right.
So,
For the 19, it doesn't. You don't need to have done 20 yet.
but could I send in 2018?
No.
Okay.
Let's see. If you're. So you can use Schedule C line 7 from the 2019 taxes. Yes. 2000. You choose whichever one is better, 2019 or 2020.
And you can apply if you have independent contractor income and W-2 income. It's just that the PPP is only going to be based on your independent contractor Schedule C income, but you can have W-2 income. It doesn't take you out of the running.
Thank you.
Sorry, I think somebody else. Yes, the second. So yeah, so it's just on your Schedule C income, not on your W-2. Anything else? Has a lot of people gotten PPPs already?
No.
Is there an easy way to calculate your Schedule C income? Do you have a pilot 1099 sitting on your desk? This is 19. I mean, you could use 19. So 19's extended deadline was October 15th. You don't need to have done 20 unless you think that 20 is going to be a higher amount than 19. And so your Schedule C is only on the 1099, not on the W-2. So you can ignore the W-2 portion and just do your 1099, which, right? So your Schedule C is your money that you make on 1099s, less business related expenses that are allowable, gets you to your net. Separate return, there is a separate line. So when you look at your return, there are two lines you could look at on your Schedule C. Line 7, which is gross revenue, and then line 31 is net revenue. And you could choose whichever one gets you.
I think they might be asking about W-2 versus 1099 income. And those are your W-2 incomes reported on your 1040 on the cover page on a different line than your independent contractor income. So on your Schedule C will only be 1099 income. It will not have any of your W-2 in that schedule.
What if you have a corporation? I heard that there are businesses that can get it's a personal corporation.
And do you pay on payroll?
Yes, except I haven't paid on payroll because I haven't made enough money. But
did you do it in 2019?
No, there wasn't enough money to pay payroll, so then it doesn't count.
How are you incorporated? What is the entity type?
It's a C corporation.
So I think on corporations, it's basically you have to get to the loan amount for a corporation. You can take your payroll wages plus health insurance costs plus state tax and divide that by 12 and multiply it by 2.5. I don't believe there's another way to get it on the C Corp. The only other thing is if you had other income and you could get it, if all of your income was through this C Corp and no payroll, then no. But if you had other income that was going through a Schedule C, you could get it on that.
But if you were paying yourself through a corporation as an independent contractor,
yes,
then you would apply, and you didn't have salary, you would apply as the independent contractor based on your Schedule C versus through your corporation.
Got it.
If you would need to have salary to apply through your corporation.
Yeah.
And when you say salary, only 1099. So any
No, salary meaning no 1099 through payroll with payroll taxes deducted. If you're paying yourself and as a 1099, right, with no payroll taxes, that's not payroll. That's just 1099. But that has to flow through your tax return in some way, right? Because at some point you have to pay tax on it, and it should be flowing through your tax return onto your Schedule C.
Okay. But I'm saying that the only thing you base it on is 1099 income.
If you're applying as an individual sole proprietor, the only thing that it is based on is your 1099 income, which is reported on Schedule C.
And as
you're applying as a corporation, you're going to base it on W-2 salaried wages that you pay through payroll with payroll taxes withheld, plus any health benefits and state taxes.
That are paid from the corporation.
Paid from the corporation.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
The Schedule C to PPP is really designed to catch the people who are not in either bucket, right? So you're either in the bucket of an employer who is receiving money to pay you on payroll, or if you're not ever paid by payroll, they're letting you do this PPP as a replacement for your wages.
Yeah.
I mean, there are people who fall in the middle, but
Well, I'd say that most of my quote unquote income is probably W-2s from residuals and stuff like that.
and then you collect unemployment on that.
No, I can't collect unemployment because I'm a corporation.
If you're getting W-2 income, it's not to your corporation.
Corporation,
You're a
right.
person.
That's personally. Yeah, personally.
Yeah,
So
so
you could get unemployment on your W-2 wages, regular unemployment.
No, I'm not allowed to because I have a corporation.
that's not true. That shouldn't be true.
Oh.
I know people, I share a corporation with a lighting designer who hasn't worked since March, and he is now not being paid on payroll and is collecting unemployment.
Oh.
I mean, your unemployment is purely based on wages that you
Right.
receive through payroll.
Right.
And it should have nothing to do with anything else, right? Because somebody could have 5 companies and still be paid on payroll.
Right.
So we have some questions here about the likeliness of a review if your gross income's over 150. So I think the point is you're certifying on both that economic uncertainty makes it necessary for you to apply for those funds. In round 2 goes a step farther and requires you to show a 25% revenue loss. And so I think that with round 1, they're saying they're not going to take it for granted if you have over 150K in gross revenue that you actually needed that loan. And so they haven't said what sort of review that might be, but given that they're calling out the first draw loan, it would likely be based on they'd look at if you did have a decrease in revenue, if you had other sources of income that you could have used to cover your losses.
And also you should look at the calculation, because you don't have to use line 7. You could use line 31. So depending on if the calculations come close, you might just use line 31 so you're not subject to that review, if that makes sense.
There's no minimum loan amount for PPP. There's people who got $50 PPP loans round 1, I think. So as long as you have some income on line 7, you can apply.
I would just, when you ask for the purpose of the loan, I would leave it to payroll.
As an independent contractor.
Yeah. Then don't put anything else. Just make it simple. It's payroll. It's paying you your payroll. Because that's all you need is to show this Schedule C. You don't need anything else. Any more questions? But I just want to emphasize one thing that Lucy said, that Biden had put a 14-day priority period so that they would not look at loans for people who have less than 20 employees in this 2-week period that ends tomorrow. I don't know that it makes it faster or not, but if you can and do it, I would do it. If not, the loan processing is still open. And as I understand it, it is still a priority of theirs. So I do think that the small ones that are simple get approved faster.
If I go to a bank, I just say I want to apply for a PPP loan.
Mm-hmm. And if you haven't applied for one in the past, you make sure you specify first draw that you haven't applied.
Most banks will, if you're going to go through a bank, most banks will require that you already have an account open. Some will open an account for you, but that's harder to find. So if you don't already have a bank that will allow you to apply, these online lenders might be a better option for you.
And the Actors Federal Credit Union, are they helping with the PPP loans?
I know one person who got it. I don't know how many. I don't know other people who applied, but I do know one person who got it.
Through them. Okay.
Through them. And so somebody asked how long. You know, in the first round, people were getting approved in 2 days. And we've gotten some approved in 3-4 days this round, and some we're just hanging on. I feel like that this round, I don't know that I've done any of these self-employed this round, but I think that the SBA is looking at things more carefully, and we have gotten more things kicked out for not signing or dating or things like that. But I do think somehow I think these online lenders might be faster. Do you think that, Lucy?
I think applying with a Schedule C probably is faster because it's pretty simple to confirm your loan amount. That the more complicated your ask gets, the longer it takes. But I've had some approved within 5 days of applying, and I'm 6 weeks into waiting on another loan. So it really is, they're trying to prevent fraud this time around. There was a lot of fraud the first time around, so they're taking longer. I mean, Biden did say with the priority period that they were also trying to speed up the time it was taking for some of these people who kind of gotten stuck at the SBA waiting.
I think we missed about first draw. Can you explain the first draw loan calculation using line 7, gross income over a certain amount of 150 might be subject to what sort of review and how likely? I don't know that they'll look at more than you would have to, maybe you would have to produce bank statements or a tax return, but I don't know how likely it is. I mean, if you said that you produce something with a gross revenue of $1 million, you probably are more likely than at 160. And if the calculation on line 31 still gets you to the cap, right, of the 20,833, just use that and don't use line 7.
We've got a question about a person's bank said they need a business account, and we encountered that with someone else as well. That is your bank's decision. And it's probably because it gets a lot more complicated to parse out income when it's your personal business. It's your personal bank statement that you are getting business, but that is not an SBA rule. And so you could look to some of these other online lenders.
The funds get direct deposited. So 20,833 was the 833 I said, and that is the largest amount you can receive for PPP as a self-employed individual. Does one seem best? I actually know people who've received them through all three.
Your bank might have an online portal set up for you to apply through. They're asking if you need to go into the bank or you can do it online. So you probably can go to the bank's website and see how they're doing the forms, whether it's online portal that they've created or you fill it out in person.
I mean, I feel I was receiving one through Dime, and I don't know that it was actually on their portal. I feel like I had to talk to somebody to get to the portal. So you could look, and if you don't, I would call them. And if you told me you were banking at Chase or Bank of America, I might just say, and you don't have a banker that you know, I would tell you to go through one of these online lenders, because you're just in a big old sea of. I don't think that these loans are making money for the banks. I think they're more of a nuisance than anything. So for the 25% reduction in income, it could be a draft Schedule C. So I would actually, if you, you could just use your bank statements. If you haven't done your 2020 tax return, you could use your bank statements, pick a quarter. I am going to assume I would guess that the second or the third quarter probably are best, and circle revenue on your bank statements for 2020 versus 2019 and see if you get there and not finish your tax return quite yet. So if you are getting PUA, I would choose 8 weeks, but you're not going to do that until forgiveness. Because it's the lump sum you're getting is your purely your income, it can be divided over the 8 weeks. And then 8 weeks would mean that you are losing your PUA for less time than if you chose a longer period of time.
Just one note about the 8-week period is that the annual salary cap for forgiveness is $100,000. So an 8-week period, that cap is $15,385 for 100,000. So if you're getting the full 28,333, then you need to do more than an 8-week period.
Oh, you do?
Because it's still annualized 100,000 over the period.
You're right. So that's, did you do the math on the 20?
So 24 weeks would be.
If you can't get you can still apply. Right now, the PPP deadline is March 31st. I hope it will change, but so if you don't get it in tomorrow, you have till March 31st. It doesn't look to me like the money is running out, and this new relief bill that Congress is voting on has more money for PPP, but I wouldn't sit on it because they have been slow. I think we're getting close to time.
Did you say March 31st or 21st?
31st.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So if you got the max amount, it's 11 weeks that you'd need to use.
Right, because the gross salary can't be more than $100,000, and you would divide that by 52 to get to that. So if you get that full 20,833, you would need to choose 11 weeks on your forgiveness.
But yeah, the forgiveness is any amount between 8 and 24 weeks now for round 1 or round 2.
All right. Any last question? I think the choice, so how would you determine the choice between 8 and 24 weeks? I think so your salary can't be more, you would do the math. So $100,000 is the cap salary. So you would divide that by 52, that is $19.23 a week. So you would choose, if let's say your loan amount was $15,000, you would divide that by the 11,923 and see how many weeks you need to get. Because the government is saying they will not pay for any salaries over $100,000 annualized. So what, 15,000 divided by the 1923, you would choose 8 weeks for that. Does that make sense? I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that before. I actually don't know that I realized that. At what point that you don't choose forgiveness to the end? And I think you have 6 months after the loan period to end to do.
I think it's 10 months after the loan period.
Right.
You have plenty of time.
We put in earlier in this chat the forgiveness form, but each bank has, whoever you get your loan from, the bank will give you a link for forgiveness. But if you, I think we posted it earlier on, but we will send it in the email. We'll send a couple of these. There it is. There's the form. That is the forgiveness form, but you will probably, that is just to give you an idea. Your bank will probably have an online form for you to fill out.
And just send all of this to us. Thank you.
Yes, and I think we'll turn it over, but everybody should make sure that they look at the TCG website for advocacy alerts, because things are changing. There are things that we know are going to change again in the next week, and for the most part, everything has been changing for the good. So you should keep an eye on it. All right. Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much, Lucy and Andrea, and I'm glad we got to a lot of the questions. And as she mentioned, and I think Corinna has been fabulous at getting things in the chat, posting info and links. So please do sign up for the advocacy alerts. Also, if you can, please consider supporting this work at tcg.org/donate. We've provided this webinar at no cost today because we know people are really facing challenges, and we know it's critical that theater people access federal relief. If you can give to TCG or help spread the word, your support will help us leading for a just and thriving theater ecology, and we'd be ever so grateful. Also, we have a lot more events coming up in March and April, including World Theater Day on March 27th, and our first ever Climate Action and Environmental Justice Summit on April 22nd. So please check out the events calendar and join us. And finally, as we've been mentioning, we're going to share the archived video with all of the additional resources within the next few days. And we're also going to be sending more information on upcoming opportunities for technical assistance soon. So until then, thank you very much for joining us. Thanks again, Lucy and Andrea, and the behind the scenes staff, Anne and Corinna, who manage this webinar. So we'll be in touch soon. Thanks so much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
Bye.
You.
Bye. Thanks.